Hello there, welcome to Bryan Lomax Movie Talk, and this year's 31 on 31, brought to you by Cody Leach, myself, Willis Greedius CP, and Sean Chandler, of course. This year we are doing Unholy Terrors. If you want to know just exactly which franchise that entails, please check out the description box. They are listed there. But suffice to say, this has a theme, an overall theme of kind of supernatural horror that perhaps has a more religious bent. Think demons, that kind of thing. Now, confession time. This ain't my kind of horror, it's got to be said. I've always steered away from this kind of horror. It's not my go-to as far as horror goes. Cody even knows that, because before we did this, he approached me and he said, "Look, I know you have a hard time with this stuff, so if you want to sit this one out, don't worry, no judgment." But yeah, I decided let's just do it. Let's just do it. Okay, so I just felt like I needed to say that so that you have some idea of where I sit with regards to these movies. I have certain issues with a lot of these movies, at least half of these movies, that stem primarily from my faith beliefs. So I don't want to bash you over the head with my faith beliefs, but just so you know where I'm coming from, that often is what taints my perception, my opinion of these movies. It's a very subjective thing. It requires no criticism. It just is what it is. So please be kind in the comments. If not, I just won't respond. But yeah, 31 movies. Let's get down to it. Number 31 is The Omen 4, which, quite frankly, is one of the dullest films I've ever seen, horror or otherwise. It's a made-for-TV movie. The biggest thing about this that kind of upsets me is that if you look at the original Omen trilogy, not a great series of films, the first one notwithstanding, but it ended the way a truly biblical horror should end, which is with the return of Jesus casting Satan into hell. You can't get a more biblical ending than that. But if you have that ending, which we did in The Omen 3, it means that nothing that comes afterwards makes sense. Like, if Jesus returned in The Omen 3, which we're supposed to, believe that he did, then why is the planet still going about their business? And why is all of a sudden spiritualism the big threat that kind of, it makes no sense. It's ridiculous. Number 30 is Blair Witch 2, Book of Shadows. I've not seen this since it came out at the cinema. I've no urge to go and see it again. I didn't want to rewatch it for the sake of this. I saw it the one time. That was enough. It was dull. It was depressingly dull. The story, the characters are pathetic. It just completely goes against the first movie in style and tone. It's just an oddity. That's the thing. It's just this bizarre, odd movie that could have been any kind of weird-ass witch possession type movie. It's just that they slapped the name Blair Witch on it. Number 29 is The Exorcist 2, The Heretic. I have no idea what I watched when I was watching this. It was weird. It was just, lay off the drugs is all I would say. If you're a filmmaker and you're going behind the camera, you're going to start yelling roll, yelling action, then lay off the drugs, because I think whoever made this, John Borman I believe, was probably on too many. Again, it's just boring. It tries to do some character stuff, but it fails miserably. I'm not engaged at any point. They have this crazy kind of dream machine thing where they can go into people's minds and see their dreams. It gets a little bit sci-fi. It's the wrong franchise. It's the wrong franchise to be putting that kind of stuff in, quite frankly. And spending much of the movie looking at a locust butt as it flies through the air to the sounds of some weird-ass score. And number 28 is The Nun. Biggest problem with this movie is that it feels rote. It feels generic as anything. And this may sound a bit weird, being that this is a horror kind of related video, but there's no lightness in it at all. It's just all doom, gloom, depressing. There are movies on this list towards the top. I will talk about one in particular where they managed to throw a bit of lightness in there. Despite the horror that is unfolding, there is a bit of lightness. There is a bit of humanity, something to hold on to, something to make the journey worthwhile. But with this film, there's none of that there. There's no warmth. I don't care about the lead characters. I quite frankly have forgotten all about them at this point, and I only watched the film a few weeks ago. I don't want to bang on this too much, but it's where I come from a subjective level. If you're fighting Satan, if you're fighting some kind of demonic force that is within the Christian spiritual realm, then I need to hear Jesus being mentioned. The power of Christ compels you, that kind of thing. It's just, but we don't. We're in a convent, for crying out loud. We're in a convent, and at no point do these nuns call on the power of Christ. Number 27 is The Curse of La Llorona. Yeah, same really. Repeat all the comments I just said for The Nun. It's just generic. You see the scares come in. A lot of them are jump scares. They do some attempt at some character work. You got this mum who's just trying to protect her children. The scares come from that, and it's just, again, it's generic. I've seen this before, and not just outside of the Conjuring universe. It feels reminiscent of stuff we've already seen within the Conjuring universe. It just, yeah, boring. Number 26 is The Conjuring 3, The Devil Made Me Do It. Now, so there are a few movies in the Conjuring universe, like Annabelle, that kind of thing, where, okay, they're dealing with kind of certain realms where you don't necessarily touch on Christianity or anything, but this is a film that, one, purports to be based on a true story, okay? Now, that true story involves Ed and Lorraine Warren, who are Christians. They go around, they do exorcisms, they've wrote the book, The Demonologist. These are two people who are Christians. When they do these cases, they don't do it. They don't claim to do it in their own strength. They claim to do it in the strength of Christ, in the Holy Spirit. And it's like, because this is Hollywoodized nonsense, it just becomes like the essence is lost. The whole point for making this film is gone, as far as I'm concerned. Now, Vera Farmiga, Patrick Wilson are great in it. They're never less than great. As far as actors go, I love them in whatever they do, to be honest. But they're saddled with a script that, for me, it just doesn't work for me. You've got this character who is a woman of faith. She carries the cross. She talks about that in roundabout ways without ever actually mentioning Jesus. And it just, instead they throw this demonic force at them towards the end in such a Hollywood way that any resemblance to the true events are long gone out the window. And then, yeah, it turns out that the love between husband and wife is what casts the demon out. Nonsense. What a load of crap. Don't claim to be based on true events. That's the thing. I take my criticism a bit more seriously of the actual Conjuring movies. The spin-offs, less so, but the Conjuring movies themselves, I take a bit more seriously when I'm criticising, because they all open with that moniker of based on actual events. All right, okay, well, hit us with something good, because I don't want this Hollywood nonsense. And number 25 is The Omen 3, The Final Conflict, which features a dire performance, central performance by Sam Neill. The moment when he's talking to Christ on the cross is just unbearable to watch. It's cringe. I feel embarrassed for the guy. You know, he isn't Patrick Wilson. He isn't Vera Farmiga. He doesn't quite have the chops to take a crap script and at least deliver in the performance side of things. The script for this movie is terrible, therefore his performance is terrible. Now, the reason this film is as high as it is because, given that it's a Hollywood movie, I'm quite surprised by how it ends, which is exactly the way I was talking about with the return of Christ and the devil being thrown into, you know, we don't see this, we're told it on a title card, but it surprises me. It surprises me that a Hollywood movie has that ending. They would never get away with that today. There is no way on earth they could put that film out in cinemas these days without people mudslinging and, yeah, going on rants against Christianity and things like that. But yeah, that's the one thing. That's the one thing I give it props for having the balls to do that. As I say, it makes any movies that come after it irrelevant or nonsensical. But yeah, beyond that, it's a pretty dull movie. At number 24 is The Exorcist: The Beginning. Now, this is the one that is directed by Renny Harlin. So, obviously, we've got another film on this list, Dominion, the Exorcist prequel, which was directed by Paul Schrader. And what happened with that film is essentially what happened with Zack Snyder's Justice League, but without the fanfare. Now, yeah, Schrader made his movie, the studio didn't like it, so they got Renny Harlin to come in, reshoot some stuff, make it more action orientated, and it's dull. It doesn't work. Now, there's one thing it does better than Schrader's version, and that is the casting of the female lead. I forget her name, Isabella Skirko. Yeah, basically the Bond girl from GoldenEye, and she was in Reign of Fire as well. I think, given the material she's given, and given that she's kind of been pasted into the cracks of the original film, I think she does a really good job. I think she does a better job than the actress from Schrader's version. That being said, nothing else about this film is as good as Schrader's version. It's dull. It's given the fact that they do put more action in it, they do put more kind of supposedly scary moments in it and more shock value moments in it. It never quite grabs me. It's got a showdown at the end, like the last 10 minutes, which goes a bit bonkers, which is kind of entertaining for that reason. And I do like the fact that, again, we see a character, a Christian character, a priest, who, in fighting this demon, actually does so in the name of Jesus Christ, which, you know, I don't mean to bang on about that, but if I see a priest fighting a demon, that's what I expect to see. I don't expect to see them glossing over that aspect of such a character. Number 23 is Poltergeist 3. So this takes the Poltergeist kind of template and mixes it a bit with Die Hard. It's Poltergeist meets Die Hard. We're in a large skyscraper, and yeah, all the spooky, spiritual, poltergeisty nonsense starts up again, and it's a bit dull. It's got a good concept. I like that concept. It's just nothing really makes much sense. You've got a lot of reshoots again. I don't know what the extent of the reshoots were, but the little girl who played the main character in all three films. She unfortunately died during the making of this film. And yeah, there are times when you can see that they're having to paper over the cracks. Certain characters take centre stage like 2/3 of the way in. It kind of becomes their story rather than her story. It's not great. And it's got Nancy Allen in it, who, so far, anything I've seen her in, I've not rated her particularly all that much. And number 22 is Annabelle Comes Home, which essentially is a movie-length trailer for all the various monsters and ghouls that will perpetuate the Conjuring Universe in, no doubt, movies of the future. Yeah, that's all it feels like. It's not scary. I've found the other Annabelle movies to be reasonably creepy, reasonably scary for what they are, and this just wasn't. It just felt a bit too high schooly, a bit too PG-13, a bit too let's get the teenagers in and do a few jump scares. Yeah, it's a bit lame. There's some interesting, as I say, interesting monsters that kind of rear their head, which you just think, yeah, that'll make an interesting film, maybe, I don't know. They just need to stop world building in the films and concentrate on just making a good film. And number 21 is Poltergeist 2, which doesn't make a lot of sense when it comes straight after the first one. Yeah, they do a bit of revamping here, a bit of changing the story. In the first one, we got a ancient Indian burial ground, and then here we find out, oh no, it wasn't Indians. It was actually some crazy priest guy and his followers, and basically they make this priest, this poltergeist of this priest, the central kind of antagonist. And I feel like it's coming out of the whole 80s, Freddy Krueger, Jason Voorhees, Michael Myers. I feel like it's the franchise's way of putting a face, an iconic face. They're trying to create an icon, that's the thing. They're trying to create a horror icon in the vein of those other movies. It's not great. It's all right. It's watchable. I find that it betrays the events of the first one just a bit too much. Like the father as well, kind of seems to take 2 steps back after everything that he saw in the first film. He should have no trouble really believing certain things that are told to him, and we see that he's the doubting Thomas throughout most of this film, and it's just there to give him a character arc, but it's an unnecessary character arc because it's essentially one that he had in the first film. There is one moment of body horror in it, like practical effects, when this poltergeist kind of takes a physical form, and it's really good. It's, if you like stuff like The Thing, that kind of stuff, the physical practical effects work, then there is some stuff in here to enjoy. Number 20 is Insidious Chapter 2. I have reviewed all the Insidious movies just this past month or so and ranked them, so I'm not going to go on too much about this. Suffice to say, I thought the tone was all over the place. I thought at times it gets a bit too slapstick, and the story kind of dovetails into 2 different stories that run alongside each other and then converge at the end, but I'm just not interested in one of them that's going on, and the other one, as I say, descends into a bit too much slapstick. So yeah, considering this is from James Wan, the saviour of horror, as some people would have us believe, I wasn't that impressed. Number 19 is Damien, the Omen 2. This is a film that just about gets a 3-star rating. So it's the first film on this list I would give a 3-star rating, but that's pushing it. It's a very tentative 3. It's all right, it builds on the first film. I like the idea that in the first film we see Damien as a child, in this one we see him as a teenager, and then in the next film we see him as a man. I like that we get kind of ties to the pharmaceutical companies, and to be perfectly honest, I could very well easily believe that if this were the way that Satan was to come to the earth and try to take over the earth or whatever, that he would do it through the political sphere and through pharmaceutical companies and things like that. Now, I'm not a crackpot Christian. I don't believe that is the case. But for the sake of narrative cinema, it throws up a few interesting ideas. There's a couple of gnarly kills in it, but beyond that, it is kind of forgettable. I don't remember all that much about it. Number 18 is the Poltergeist remake. This film ain't half as bad as people make out, to be honest. There are some jump scares and some silly special effects that aren't scary at all. But then there are some creepy moments that do work. But primarily, I think what makes this watchable for me is Sam Rockwell. I buy into his character as a dad struggling to provide for his family. And I like him. I think he gives a really good performance. There's a certain scene in it when he looks like he's on breaking point, and I think from a performance standpoint, he nails it. He sucks me in. I feel for this man as a result of what he's giving us. So, yeah, it's not tremendous. It's not classic horror or anything. My expectations were so low going into it that I just think I enjoyed it a bit more than I was expecting to. The same can be said for my number 17 choice, which is Annabelle. I heard really bad things about this. People kind of wrote it off, said just watch the sequel. The sequel's really good, and this isn't. Again, I kind of disagree. It's not the Citizen Kane of horror movies, but it's entertaining. There are some genuine scares, some genuine creepiness, creepy moments in it, and I do like the central story of this woman trying to protect her child, and ultimately it being a story about sacrifice, to lay one's life down for their friends. There is no greater love than to lay one's life down for their friends. Number 16 is The Exorcist 3, which is an absolutely bonkers movie. Truly and utterly bonkers. It's all over the place. It feels like 3 different movies kind of vying for the central kind of plot point. And yet, for some reason, it kind of works in a weird late 80s, early 90s, messed up kind of horror movie way. Brad Dourif is fantastic. Brad Dourif tends to be fantastic in whatever he's in. Now, unfortunately, he is in a lot of schlock, a lot of films that kind of don't really come on my radar personally. But whenever I see him in something, I just think, personally, I think Brad Dourif tends to be better than the material he's in. And this film, so I'm a big X-Files fan. And this film really reminded me of the X-Files episode Beyond the Sea, which he stars in, which is still my favourite Dourif performance. However, having seen this movie now, I see where that episode came from. You cross Silence of the Lambs with this film, you get that episode Beyond the Sea, which is a really great episode of the X-Files. And Brad Dourif in that episode is essentially playing the same character as he plays here. A slight variation on it. Someone who is possessed in some way by spirits. George C. Scott as well is really good in it. He plays this dishevelled detective working this murder case that seems to have ties, ritualistic murder ties to the original Exorcist film. And yeah, he's great in it. I like his grizzled performance. I like the journey that his character goes on as a skeptic to a man of faith who, again, doesn't defeat evil, doesn't defeat the demonic force through his own strength, but by calling upon the strength of Christ. When you're dealing with the devil, and from a biblical standpoint, then that's the only thing to call on. So yeah, I like that they go down that route. I was a bit worried at first when they killed the priest character, and I thought, oh great, you've got yet again the devil killing the man of God and all that, and it's just like, but then he comes back and he has one last hurrah, and yeah, I like that. I like that moment. It's good. It's a good film. I'm probably not going to watch it again anytime soon, but it's got a lot of merits, and I think it's pretty well directed by William Peter Blatty as well. There's one particular jump scare in it when we're on a wide shot and we see this nurse and she keeps hearing noises and she's checking doors and it's all in the wide. So you kind of feel safe because you're at a distance. But then as she turns and something happens, a camera crash zooms in. And now I can't remember seeing a crash zoom that has been that effective, to be honest, for me personally. I'm sure there have been, but right now, I just thought that was pretty effective. We don't see what happens to her in that moment. You know, we don't see the actual horror, but we are pushed into what is about to happen with that crash zoom, and it kind of makes you grip your chair, and you're like, no, 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 I don't want to go there. I don't want to go there. So yeah, that's some skillful direction there by Blatty. Number 15 is Dominion, the Exorcist prequel. So this is the film that Paul Schrader made that kind of got canned and then was pulled out again and given its own separate release on DVD. And I think it's a much better film than the one we got from Renny Harlin. You know, all respect to Renny Harlin. It's got to be hard to come in and take footage that has already been shot and work to a studio mandate and get something out of it. I would never underestimate the effort that has to go into that. But what can I say? This is a better film. It's not as action driven. It is a character story. It's a character driven story about Father Merrin and his lack of faith due to the choices he had to make during the war, and how he becomes a man of faith again by facing the ultimate evil. Yeah, there are scenes in this that we saw in snippets in Renny Harlin's film, but because they're much more fleshed out, like the Nazi stuff at the beginning, for example, it just breathes a lot more life, I think, into the character of Merrin. The fact that it's allowed to breathe just makes me more invested in this character. I liked it. It's nothing special. It's not great. It's a 3-star movie. It's solid, but definitely better than its reputation would make us believe. At number 14 is Insidious: The Last Key. Again, bit of a bonkers movie. When you start to analyse it in great detail, it kind of falls apart. It doesn't make sense. It's like 1L, from a script standpoint, has lost all sight of the rules of the universe he's created. But the main character is, you know, played by Lin Shaye, is always watchable, and there's some good scares in it, even some good, well executed jump scares, which mostly I don't like, but because they play with convention on it, one in particular, it's all right. It's watchable. Number 13 is the remake of The Omen. I think the biggest thing this has going against it, obviously, is the fact that it is mostly a scene-for-scene remake of the original, which kind of has that Gus Van Sant Psycho remake vibe about it, where you kind of don't want to accept any positives because it's just, well, it's just the same film, isn't it? But not as good. And it's like, and that's not really true. I mean, it is true in the sense that it isn't as good, but it does do some things better. If you're being a bit more objective about it, and obviously that's down to advancements in technology, the way they're able to shoot things. I find some sequences in this that are redone from the original to be a lot more tense, a lot more horror kind of driven, horrific, I would say. The scenes with the dogs, the attacking dogs, has me biting my nails a bit more than the original version did, because the original version, again, this is because of the era it was made, it's a bit stifled in comparison to what they can do now. So yeah, like I say, there are scenes that work better because of that, but overall, obviously, it does come down to the fact that this is a scene-for-scene remake. So it doesn't feel as classy, it doesn't feel as good because of the lack of originality, but I'm quite happy to watch it. You know, I would watch this if it was on TV one night. I don't quite get the level of hatred that it gets. I also, personally, find Liev Schreiber to be a bit more watchable than Gregory Peck. I've always found Gregory Peck to be a bit dry, I guess. I've not seen him in a right lot, admittedly, but the films I have seen him in, I'm just like, yeah, it's a bit dry for me. Number 12 is The Blair Witch Project. I saw this back in 1999 when it originally came out. This is a time before the internet kind of took off and everybody had access to stuff on the phones, and yeah, literally went into this not knowing much more than what I was given from a review in Empire magazine. Beyond that, it was just, yeah. And I gotta say, back then, it scared me. It genuinely scared me. There's a lot of, I think it hinges on your ability to pay attention to a lot of the details that are going on. The interviews, the information that is being given out in the interviews, so that when you get to the house at the end, it clues you in more into what's behind it, what the demonic force is, what the presence is all about. But yeah, it scared me back then. I've not seen it since. I didn't bother with a rewatch before this, but I kind of feel like it's maybe one of those movies that won't fare so well on a repeat viewing once you know what's coming. So I'm quite willing to stick with that first impression that I had way back when. It's very easy now, I think, to look at found footage movies and just say, oh great, a found footage movie. But when the directors of Blair Witch Project brought this out, it was quite something. As an aspiring filmmaker, it was kind of the birth for me, the spark that we have access. We can make a film, so there's a lot of stuff tied up with this film culturally, and just from it being a pretty well made film. Number 11 is Insidious. It's a scary film, although characters do things in it that are a bit stupid. This certain, like, it's a 3.5-star film for me. It would be a 4-star film if they could have ironed out certain kinks. Like, if you've seen a presence in your child's room where you put them down to sleep, you're not putting them down to sleep in that room again. That to me is just bad parenting. I said that in my review for the film. It stands true now. Certain things characters do just make no sense from a you have a choice standpoint. It's just there to prolong the tension, prolong the terror, and then we get to the ending, and the final act kind of dovetails. It's one movie, it becomes something else. I think I'd have preferred that dovetail maybe somewhere more around the halfway mark, if not before, so I knew more what kind of film to expect, whereas it felt more tacked on rather than organically woven into the plot. It's scary, it's well directed, there's a lot of tension in it. Number 10 is Blair Witch. So this is a sequel to the original film by Adam Wingard, director of The Guest, and most recently Godzilla vs. Kong. I'll be perfectly honest, this film scared me. It did. I don't like being out in forests on my own, to be honest. I find them kind of creepy places, let alone being out in a forest on my own at night with the most creepy ass house you've ever seen in your life. And we get characters, houses in films that are characters. You think about the Bates Motel, think about the manor in The Haunting of Hill House and things like that. Those houses become characters, and I got to say that the house at the end of this film, it's the most oppressive environment I could think to be in. For me personally, when you think about things that scare you, this might not scare you. You might not be someone who's scared by grotty architecture. I am, especially grotty architecture that's out in the middle of a forest that you can't get out of at night with a demonic force kind of playing with you and messing with you. Add to that my kind of claustrophobic sensibilities. You have this sequence in which the main female lead has to go through this underground tunnel, and you're seeing roots coming through the soil, and it got to me. I'll say, I'll admit it. It got to me. There are things in a lot of these films that might scare people, but which didn't scare me. And again, it's a bit like with comedy. It's subjective. What scares you is a very subjective thing. And for me, being in that tunnel with that woman, not knowing if something was going to come from either side, just knowing you were deep under the earth. I was tense. That whole final act in the house was very, very tense for me, because it was ticking a lot of the boxes of things that get under my skin, that scare me. So, like I say, doesn't mean it would be scary to anyone else. It was to me, because, hey, subjectivity. Number 9 is Annabelle Creation, a very well directed film. It's got to be said. It doesn't necessarily have the script down tight. There are issues with it. There are problems. Primarily, again, characters doing things that you just wouldn't do. I, as an adult, would not go wandering into a creepy ass room where I've already seen something of a spiritual nature that is a little rotten in Denmark. You ain't getting me going in there again. You know, I'm not. My curiosity has been sated. That's it. I'm done. If anything, I'm leaving. I'm packing a bag and I'm going. So yeah, characters do things like that all the time, where you're just thinking, this is so stupid. Why would you? You just wouldn't. But beyond that, those stupid choices, those stupid decisions, are a gateway to crafting some really tense, scary scenes that work purely from a horror movie level. So yeah, props to the director, but bit better work on the script next time. Number 8 is The Conjuring. It's a very tense film. It is a film that really scared me the first time I saw it. I say the first time, the only time I've seen it. I've not actually been back to it since. But it did scare me. It creeped me the heck out. I'm not that big on horror films of a spiritual nature, as I've said. There's things in them that feel a bit too real to me. But this one's a scary one. You know, if your only purpose in a horror film is to scare, then I think this does a really good job. I think, again, towards the end, it's got some namby-pamby, airy-fairy kind of love wins kind of mentality. Just think how much you love your child, and it will get rid of the demonic force that has possessed the whole house for the past hour and a half. It don't really work for me as a climax, as an ending. But beyond that, yeah, a damn scary film. Just pipping it to the post though, at number 7 is The Conjuring 2. I really liked the setting of this film. The fact that it was in Britain, in England, and just a very recognisable street to me. I'm so used to American street settings in movies. We never see something with the kind of budget and on that kind of level as the Conjuring franchise, set within an English kind of town. With the 2 up, 2 down, semi-detached. It's that kind of environment. It was refreshing, and on top of that, I felt like the character work that was done in it was much, much better. I do think it's a much stronger film than the first one with regards to the character journeys and various things that it delves into. I particularly like the fact that they have a character in there whose sole purpose is to debunk what the Warrens are doing. Because it allows for a bit more of a discussion about what's being seen, and it just feels more real to me. It's like you're basing things on supposed true stories. You can't just go in there with the believers and say, yeah, this is it, and boom, we're supposed to believe it. I like that. Actually, they have this character who's someone they've got to come against all the time, but they don't paint them out to be a crackpot. Usually in these kind of films, the person who is against the faith element or against whatever's going on, they paint them out to be a douchebag. I think again, Poltergeist 2, was it 2? No, 3. Poltergeist 3. So they had a character in that, this doctor who just poo-pooed everything, and it's like, but there's no reason for him to poo-poo things, no valid reason. Like the the reasonings he gave were pathetic. Whereas here, in this film, that character is treated with a bit more respect. You can understand why she's skeptical. She has a fairly valid argument on paper when you look at things, and it throws a bit more of a conversation in there about things of a spiritual nature and why some people may be non-believers compared to those who believe. At number 6 is Insidious 3. I've just reviewed and ranked all of the Insidious movies, so I'm not going to go on too much about it. I think it's the best of the 4 Insidious movies. Rather than going off on random tangents with other characters and having slapstick moments, it feels a bit more grounded as a film like this can be, and genuinely scary, genuinely creepy. At number 5 is Poltergeist, the original Poltergeist movie. This is a film produced by Steven Spielberg, and if you listen to certain people who were on the set of the film, he did in fact direct it. Now, Tobe Hooper is credited as director, so the truth behind all that, I guess, will never truly be known. But I gotta say, judging from some of the camera work in this, I do err on the side of this being a Spielberg kind of directed movie. If not completely, he certainly had a heavy hand in it. I say that because there's a lot of sequences where what would traditionally be done in like 5-6 shots for most directors are done in the usual Spielbergian way, which is, you start in a close-up, you work your way out, action moves into the shot to broaden it and change the shot as you're moving. And yeah, it's just, he does a lot of stuff like that where I think any other director would have said, get a shot here, right, over the shoulder, right, wide. Whereas, yeah, it's a much more fluid camera movement. Again, like I say, who knows? But it definitely has the hallmark of a Spielberg movie. One of those hallmarks is John Williams' score, which I'm not overly fond of for this film, to be honest. I feel like it's the wrong kind of film to go with his overly classical kind of score, the kind of score that he would give for E.T. and that kind of thing. It feels, doesn't always work for me. Some of the special effects as well have really dated the animated stuff. However, some of the practical effects still look really good. Still really excite me. Even though you can tell it's effects work, it's like the guy tearing his face off. I used to have a recurring nightmare when I was a kid, and it was only watching this film again, after all these years of having not seen it, that I finally realised where that recurring nightmare came from. I won't go into details, but yeah, Poltergeist was to blame, it seems. But it is definitely a scary film certainly from a child perspective. I watched this as a child. I think I would have been about 8, 9, maybe. Yeah, it scared me as a kid. And I always remember the pulling the face off in the bathroom mirror sequence. But there's humour in here as well. I talked earlier about, horror movies having light moments, having that mix of tone where with the scares you get a few laughs to kind of balance it out, but in a good way. A lot of the characters in this and their interactions feel very natural. The family unit in this feels very natural. They feel like a genuine family unit. But again, there's the sequence where the guy tears his own face off in the mirror and then wakes up and then gets the hell out of there. It's just, there's an off-the-cuff comment by one of the team that says, yeah, he won't be coming back. It's like, yeah, no, I wouldn't either. Which, again, if you look at what a lot of these films have done wrong, the whole characters sticking around after they've witnessed something like that, you wouldn't. And that's what I like about that moment, is this guy sees this thing and he's out of there. He's gone. He ain't sticking around. That, my friends, is sensible. That is not what you get in most of these horror movies. And number 4 is The Omen. Yeah, just a really good kind of horror film that really hinges, or its tension, its scares, its gravitas hinges on the notion of your child may be Satan. what do you do with that? You know, how do you love them through that? You know, it's yeah, and it's got a pretty dark ending. You know, it's you end up with Gregory Peck's character essentially trying to sacrifice his own child, which is dark. But it again, it's kind of like, you know, Abraham with Isaac. You know, what would you do for God? You know, would you go so far as to sacrifice your own son? If you know, if you put that on you, and it kind of, yeah, it raises those kind of questions. Thankfully, I don't look at my children and see the spawn of Satan, so I don't have to deal with those questions. But purely from a narrative standpoint in a movie, it sets up that notion pretty well and deals with it in quite a tense manner. So yeah, very well done. Directed by Richard Donner, who, quite frankly, you know, rest in peace first and foremost, but one of the most unsung, underrated directors ever. You know, you look at his body of work, Superman the movie for a start. Yeah, just he's done some incredible films. So Lethal Weapon 2, yeah. Omen, check it out. Number 3 is The Exorcist. I think a lot of people watch this today, you know, based on its reputation. They go to it, having never seen it, think, oh, it's got the reputation of being one of the most scariest films ever, and they watch it within a modern context. And because of that, I feel like it maybe doesn't work for a lot of people. But if you go back to the 70s when this came out, I would imagine this would have been a lot scarier. I think people in general had a bit more faith, I guess. You know, I don't know. Maybe that's true, maybe it isn't, but certainly attacked something that was a bit more at the core of society at the time, whereas today, unfortunately, people find it a bit more laughable. But beyond that, it's not really an out-and-out horror. It is a character-driven story. Again, you know, parents' responsibility towards the child who is in danger. What do they do? I think there's some really good kind of nuanced setup pieces, like having this woman curse Jesus, use Jesus' name as a curse throughout. You know, so clearly this isn't a person of faith. We see that, you know, that as a household they've left themselves open to demonic forces, and then we have a priest who once again is struggling with his own faith, and it's through dealing with this, through confronting this demonic force, that he is forced to acknowledge the very thing that he believes in, and ultimately make the sacrifice in order to save this family, which kind of makes any sequels that came after pretty redundant. But hey ho, you have a successful movie, they always have to fudge a sequel out, don't they? But you know, as a standalone film, I think it's very well made. It's if you just like a good drama, come to it from those terms rather than, oh, it's going to be, you know, full of scares and this, that, and the other. Although there are still moments in there that still hold up today, that still send a shiver down the spine. But yeah, I can understand anyone who saw this back in the day when it came out, holding to the view that it is the best horror movie ever made. I can understand anyone who's seen it after the fact thinking, yeah, is it though? So, yeah, just go into it with a bit of objectivity, and I think you'll be rewarded from your experience. And number 2 is Doctor Sleep. I've reviewed this film on my channel. I have talked about it in various other videos that I've done, so I'm not sure there's much more I can say. But for those who maybe are watching listening to my thoughts on it for the first time, the simplest thing I can say is that a sequel to one of the best horror movies, if not the best horror movie ever made, had no right to be this good. I wasn't looking at this movie when the trailers came out and when all the news was coming out that it had been greenlit. I wasn't looking at it with the prospect of going in and seeing a good film. I thought if we got a 3-star film, then okay, fair enough. It's kind of what I'd expect. But yeah, great performances, really good story. Great touchstones back to the original that don't feel like they're just hammered in there for the sake of having touchstones, but actually work as part of the character journey, as part of the character development of Danny Torrance, dealing with the things that he went through in the first film and confronting them once again here. Yeah, really good stuff. But obviously, I think at this point anyone would realise that my number one is The Shining, which, you know, I'm a big fan of Stanley Kubrick. I've reviewed all of his films on my channel. I think he is one of, or was one of, still is, you know, one of the best directors that ever was. It's a shame he didn't get going a bit faster in between films, but I think the films are as good as they are because he took his time, because he really made sure that the film he was making was a film he wanted to make. This is a film that has multiple layers. You can really dig deep. You can get into silly ass conspiracy theories if you want to, but ultimately what it shows is that this is a film that's got a lot going for it. That yeah, you can come at it from purely surface standpoint if you want, if you wish, but you can also come to it, go a bit deeper, gain something from it, a bit of understanding about the nature of evil, and yeah, and how we confront it, or how we choose not to let it in. Yeah, so if you want to hear a bit more of my thoughts on that, do check out my video essay on The Shining. Yeah, I did it on my other channel, The Movie Evangelist, but I've also put it in a playlist on this channel. So yeah, but The Shining, still one of the best horror movies ever made, as far as I'm concerned. While it doesn't have out-and-out scares, it never goes for the jump scare. It's always about the tension. It's always about the sense of dread that is constantly permeating through this hotel. Again, the hotel itself being a character within the movie. So, yeah, brilliant, brilliant stuff. But there you go. That is my 31 on the 31st for 2021. Do check out Cody Leach's video, Willie Screedier CP's video, and Sean Chandler's video, all of whom have got more subs than me, so let's face it, you probably checked out their video before mine, but hey ho. Go and check them out if you haven't. Let us all know your thoughts on our selections. Let me know your thoughts on mine down below. Do you think I'm crazy with some of my ranking here? Do you hate me now because of my thoughts on James Wan? Yeah, just remember, be civil. Otherwise, I just won't respond, to be honest. But yeah, thank you for watching this video. And until next time, cracking.